Hello students, this is Dr. Saurabh Rajaram Mhatre from Shri RLT College of Science, Akola. So, in last lecture we have learned about external respiration. In that we learned exchange of gases between alveolus and capillaries. So, today we are going to learn about internal type of respiration. So, in respiration, internal type of respiration, the two main components of blood involved in the transport of respiratory gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, are the RBCs and plasma. Two main components of the blood involved in the transport of respiratory gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen. So these two components are RBCs and plasma. These are the two components of the blood which transport the carbon dioxide and oxygen. So first of all, transport of oxygen. Of the total oxygen transported, only 3% is transported in the dissolved state by the plasma. Means total oxygen transported, only 3% is transported in a dissolved state by the plasma. Remaining 97% is bound to the hemoglobin present in the RBCs. Means near about 97% of oxygen is transported by the hemoglobin present in the RBCs. So hemoglobin acts as a respiratory carrier. Hemoglobin acts as a respiratory carrier. It has high affinity for oxygen and combines with the to form oxyhemoglobin. It has high affinity for binding oxygen, and when it combines with the oxygen, it forms oxyhemoglobin. Theoretically, one molecule of hemoglobin Hb has 4 Fe plus ions, each of which can pick up a molecule of oxygen. Means the reaction is Hb plus 4O2, Hb plus 4O2 to forms Hb4O2. Hb4O2 means oxyhemoglobin. So when oxyhemoglobin is formed, then it is transported from lungs to the tissue where it is readily dissociated to release oxygen. Oxyhemoglobin is transported from lungs to the tissue where it is readily associated to release oxygen. Then dissociates means here is breakdown of oxyhemoglobin. There the reaction is oxyhemoglobin means Hb4O2, it dissociated into Hb plus 4 oxygen molecules. However, the degree of separation of hemoglobin, the degree of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen depends upon the oxygen tension. Means that is PPO2 means 100% saturation is rare. Maximum saturation of 95 to 97% is at PPO2 in alveolus, and there is 100 mm Hg pressure, partial pressure. So maximum saturation of 95 to 97% is as PPO2 in alveolus. So after that, saturation, degree of saturation decreases with the drop of PPO2. Drop of PPO2. This begins the dissociation of HBO2. This begins the dissociation of HBO2. At 30 mmHg of PPO2, only 50% saturation can be maintained. Only 50% saturation can be maintained at 30 mmHg of PPO2. So the relationship between HbO2 saturation and oxygen tension, PPO2 means oxygen tension, is called as oxygen dissociation curve. The relation between HbO2 saturation and oxygen tension means PPO2 is called as oxygen dissociation curve. This oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is sigmoid curve. Sigmoid curve. Sigmoid curve. And this oxygen hemoglobin dissociated sigmoid curve, it shifts the right due to increase in hydrogen concentration. Increase in hydrogen concentration. So there is PpCO2 and rise in temperature and rise in DPG means diphosphoglycerate and forms in the RBCs during glycolysis. So it lowers the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. So this is the sigmoid curve, and due to this dissociation curve, due to this DPG forms the RBCs during glycolysis, so it lowers the affinity of hemoglobin for the oxygen. So there is a concept that is Bohr effect. Bohr effect, it is a shift of oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve due to change in partial pressure of carbon dioxide in blood, that is known as Bohr effect. Then Haldane effect, oxyhemoglobin function as an acid. Oxyhemoglobin functions as an acid, so it decreases pH of the blood. It decreases pH of the blood due to increase the number of hydrogen ions. HCO3 changes into H2O and CO2, means HCO3 changes into H2O plus CO2 means water and carbon dioxide. So in the alveolus, where the PPO2 means oxygen tension is high, the PpCO2 is low. PpCO2 is low. When in alveoli there is PpO2 is high, then PpCO2 is low. Then the oxygen binds with the hemoglobin, but in tissue where PpO2 is lower, and PpCO2 is high, the hemoglobin does not hold as much oxygen, so it releases oxygen for the diffusion into the tissue cells. This is the main central dogma. When alveolus have PpO2 high and PpCO2 low, the oxygen binds with hemoglobin, but in tissue PpO2 is lower and PpCO2 is higher, then the oxyhemoglobin means hemoglobin does not hold oxygen. That's why it releases oxygen for the diffusion in the tissue cells. Then in the diagram we can clearly see the different curve, which is which curve? That is the Bohr curve, which is sigmoid curve, and this Bohr effect curves having concentration of carbon dioxide in the curve, sigmoid curve, we can see this. Then in x-axis, that is oxygen ppO2, means oxygen pressure, partial pressure, oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, that is pp means partial pressure of oxygen, and in y-axis, that is Hb, percentage of oxygen saturation. So on this oxygen ppO2 x-axis and hemoglobin percentage oxygen saturation on y-axis, that Bohr effect indicates the sigmoid type of curve. So this is the first stage in the transport of oxygen in internal respiration. So in next lecture we will see the transport of carbon dioxide. For today, thank you students.